Invention is not disruptive. Only customer adoption is disruptive. There are a lot of things that you can be given, but those things can confuse you because they're not the things that construct your life. It's your choices. If you do something in a new way, and I don't care what it is, people are initially going to misunderstand it relative to the traditional way.
Need motivation?
Watch a top 10 with Believe Nation.
Top 10, I got a top 10. Got my motivation high for my top 10. Gotta learn from the wise women and men all my life. Like na 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 na. For my top 10, top 10, top 10, na 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 na. This one's for my top 10.
Hey, it's Evan Carmichael, and I make these videos because you are probably the most ambitious person in your circle, but you know you're capable of more, and you get that push by surrounding yourself with the best. So today, let's learn from one of the best, Jeff Bezos, and my take on his top 10 rules for success. Enjoy.
Okay, let's kick it off with rule number 1. Start with a narrow focus.
I would definitely advise a small startup company to be as narrow and as focused as is possible to be. If you look at the original Amazon business plan, there was no hint of anything other than books in it, and it was not on my radar. I was thinking I wanted to build an online bookstore. That was it. And it worked way better than I thought it would, and we launched music, and that worked better than I thought it would, and we launched videos. I think it's so long ago I can really remember. I think it was actually VHS tapes. Is that possible? And that worked better than we thought it would. And then I sent email to customers. So I picked about 1,000 customers, and I said, besides the things we sell today, books, music, and video, what would you like to see us sell? And the list came back incredibly long tail. It was almost like whatever was on their mind at the moment. It was like, I wish you sold windshield wipers for my car. And I was like, really? Windshield wipers? That wasn't on the business plan, but that's an interesting idea. And so today, we basically, if you're buying your windshield wipers anywhere else, you're probably getting ripped off. So it's been, kind of one foot in front of the other.
Rule number 2, eliminate waste.
One of the key things about lean, defect reduction, being efficient, not letting defects travel downstream in any process. If you're going to eliminate waste, or as the Japanese call it, muda, you have to have information. And the data center has historically been an information-free zone as far as application developers are concerned. You would write code, and you have no idea how it's consuming resources. You're too insulated because you're in a pool of resources, and you can't meter it. One of the biggest, still unappreciated benefits of AWS is that application developers get a real sense of which inner loop is driving all the cost. Yeah. And that's a big deal. So that's just starting to, that's one of the ways that this approach to infrastructure dramatically reduces costs. In our data center, in our fulfillment centers and in our customer service centers, we have, we're always seeking to keep defects from moving downstream. So this is a principle that was probably best applied in the first best applied by Toyota. And they had this idea of that they call the andon cord, which basically any factory worker could pull the cord and stop the whole automobile manufacturing line. And for old school auto manufacturing companies, that was considered crazy, absolutely insane. In fact, the opposite principle was typically at work, which is you did everything possible to keep that line running. And here Toyota flipped that on its head, and they said, look, anytime there's a defect, no matter how small, we want you to pull the cord and stop the whole line. And stopping things if you do that in a line that has a lot of defects, initially you get a lot of andon cord pulls and it's very expensive. But over time, if you use that approach, you eliminate the defects closer and closer to the source. And the people who are fans of lean manufacturing and these kinds of techniques take almost as an article of faith, although there's a lot of evidence to support this in very diverse industries, that the further a defect travels downstream, the more expensive it becomes to fix. And so you want to stop those things. You don't want them to repeat and happen over and over.
Rule number 3, pursue customer adoption.
Invention is not disruptive. Only customer adoption is disruptive. At Amazon, we've invented a lot of things that customers did not care about at all. And believe me, they were not disruptive to anyone. So it's only when customers like the new way that anything becomes disruptive. And so really it's just saying that you want to, if somebody comes to you with a business plan that they claim is disruptive, you should ask them to explain it to you in simpler language. And the simpler language is, why are customers going to adopt this? Why are they going to like it? Why is it better than the traditional way?
Rule number 4, take time to learn.
Just find something that you're passionate about. I would definitely, on the career advice side, the most important thing about your first job out of school is to pick a place where you think where your learning per unit time is going to be very high. You can optimize for a bunch of variables, and it can get very confusing. Where is the location? What's the salary going to be? And all those things are worth considering. They're all important. But make sure you pull back after you've done your analysis and say, am I also picking the place that I believe my learning per unit time is going to be the fastest? And you learn much more from a best practices company than you do. You learn no matter where you go. So if you go work for somebody and you're like, God, these people are all crazy. This is insane. You'll learn a lot of negative lessons that you can use later, and you can not do those things. But that process of elimination method takes a long time. So it's better to try and find a place that has really high hiring standards, some of the basics especially, a place that's trying to recruit only A's hire A's, and B's hire C's, and C's hire D's. So you've got to hire only A's. And you need to pick a company that's doing those kinds of fundamental practices well, because then you'll learn so much. It'll set you up to do other things. So I would say that's probably the best career advice I give.
Also, if you want to have more self-confidence and self-belief, I've designed a special free training to help you do it. The science says it can take up to 254 days of consecutive action to build a new habit. And I want that for you. I want you to build the habit of self-belief. So what I'm going to do is email you every day for 254 days a link to an unlisted video that will shift your belief forward. To get on it for free, the link to join is in the description below.
If everything has to work in 2 to 3 years, then that limits what you can do. If you absolutely can't tolerate critics, then don't do anything new or interesting. The number one thing that has made us successful by far is obsessive, compulsive focus on the customer.
Rule number 5, remove friction.
It's definitely about leaning into the future. And so when you look at the kinds of things that you want to be able to do with your voice, it changes for those of you who have used an Echo, the fact that it's always on, that you never have to charge it, it's always sitting there ready in your kitchen or your bedroom or wherever you put it, the fact that you can talk to it in a natural way removes a lot of barriers, a lot of friction, a lot of little tiny pieces of friction to be able to do things, to ask what the weather is. It's easier than taking your phone out of your pocket. And what people have found over and over again is that by removing the tiniest amounts of friction from ordinary activities, really people appreciate that, and it improves customers' lives.
Rule number 6, weigh the situation.
Sometimes, we expand into new areas in 2 ways. One is kind of, from a customer need. We will work from a customer need to the skills that we need. And the other one is skills forward, from a skill set we have to a new set of customers. So Kindle is an example of a customer need, and so we don't have any hardware skills. We've been doing this for 10 years now. But we'll go back and if you go back in time 10 years, we had no hardware team. We had to hire somebody to lead our hardware group and then build a hardware team and build some institutional competence at it and so on. That's a customer need backwards approach. And then skills forward, a great example of that is Amazon Web Services. We had the skills to do AWS. We had probably more distributed computing expertise than anybody else in the world because of the transactions. Transaction systems are so complicated and hard to build, and we had a service-oriented architecture of great complexity, probably before anybody else. And so because we were doing that, we could kind of see the future a little bit, and decided to build AWS, which has turned into a huge business in its own right. And that is, if you were always, business is very situational. And so rules of thumb are good, but they have to be applied to the right situation. So sometimes the old maxim that you should stick to the knitting is correct, but sometimes the adage that you should stick to the knitting is wrong. And a senior leader's job is to figure out in which situation are you.
Rule number 7, attract investors.
There are a few things I think if you want to be an innovative company that you have to do. First of all, I think innovation is a point of view. You have to actually select people that are part of the company who want to innovate and explore. Being a pioneering company and an explorer company isn't for everybody. Some people wake up in the morning and they get their energy, the thing they think about in the shower is they start their annual planning process, or however you want to think about it, with who are the 3 companies that we're going to kill this year. That's the Conqueror mentality. And it's a competitor-focused mentality instead of a customer-focused mentality. And there's nothing, that mentality can succeed, by the way. So I'm not claiming, the pioneering explorer approach is the only effective one. But when you attract people who have the DNA of pioneers and the DNA of explorers, you build a company of like-minded people who want to invent. And that's what they think about when they get up in the morning. How are we going to work backwards from customers and build a great service or a great product? That's a key element to invention. And that part is fun, by the way. So if you're the right kind of person and you like to invent, and you like change, everything you see as you move about the world, you think how it could be improved, that's just fun. And we at Amazon, we've over the last 18 plus years attracted a bunch of people like that, and we have a ton of fun doing it.
Rule number 8, specialize.
We are, can we be, let's take China and India very separately. So we are winning in India very, very well. We have an amazing leader there, a guy named Amit, who has been at Amazon for 15 years and here in the US, and he moved back to India 4 or 5 years ago to start Amazon India. And that team is doing well. They have passed Flipkart. They are the leader in India now. So that is similar to Japan, Germany, the UK, France. Those countries are very. In China, the leader is JD, and we are totally adapting our strategy in China. We cannot run our normal playbook in China. It has to be specialized and different. So we're doing that.
Rule number 9, be customer focused.
I think we have always had, and it's been from the very, very beginning, you can go back and read our 1997 shareholder letter, and the core of the company is customer obsession as opposed to competitor obsession. And that works really well for us. I think that the advantage of being customer focused is that customers are always dissatisfied. They always want more. And so they pull you along. If you're trying to serve them, they pull you along. Whereas if you're competitor obsessed, if you're the leader, you can kind of look around and you see everybody running behind you. Maybe you slow down a little. And customers are always pulling you. So I think if you want to be pioneering, if you want to be inventive, if you want a culture that is experimental, then you want to be customer obsessed rather than competitor obsessed.
And rule number 10, the last one before some very special bonus clips, is choose service and adventure.
any young person, even before they start their career, is to really think about their choices. Because I find young people, and when I was young, I made this mistake too. You can get very fixed on your gifts. So everybody has gifts. You know, you have gifts and you have things that you didn't get gifted. Maybe you're extremely beautiful. Maybe you're extremely good at mathematics. There are a lot of things that you can be given. But those things can confuse you because they're not the things that construct your life. It's your choices that construct your life, not your gifts. You can celebrate your gifts. Be proud of them. Be happy of them. Actually, don't be proud of them. Be celebratory of them. But you can't be proud because they're gifts. They were given to you. You didn't earn them. You can only be proud of the things you earn. And so, as I got older, I started to realize I wasn't proud of my gifts. I was always good at school. School was always easy for me. And I was always proud that I was a great student. I got A's in all my classes. I was good at math, all of that. And I thought that's who I was. But it's not true. Those are the things that are gifts. What was hard for me is deciding to work hard, deciding to use my gifts in certain ways, to challenge myself, to do things that I didn't think I could do, to put myself in uncomfortable situations. I would say to a young person, you can choose a life of ease and comfort, or you can choose a life of service and adventure. Which one of those, when you're 90 years old, are you going to be more proud of?
Now I've got a special bonus clip that I think you're gonna enjoy, but before that, it's time for the question of the day. I wanna know, what was your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action for the next week? When you just get inspired, you watch a video, you get motivated, amazing. The science says you have a 35% chance of actually doing something, actually following through. That, Believe Nation, is not enough. That is not you, not now, not anymore, not today. But when you get inspired and then you create a specific plan of action for what you're gonna do, that number jumps to 91% chance of you following through. And when you commit publicly to others, like leaving a comment in this video, it jumps to 95%. So the question of the day is your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action for the next week. Put it down in the comments below, and maybe next week I'll profile you.
One of them is you have to have a willingness to fail. You have to have a willingness to be misunderstood for long periods of time. If you do something in a new way, and I don't care what it is, people are initially going to misunderstand it relative to the traditional way. And there'll be well-meaning critics who genuinely want the best outcome, but they're worried about this new way. And there'll also be, of course, self-interested critics who have a vested interest in the traditional, they have some profit stream tied to the traditional way. But doing things, if you never want to be criticized, for goodness sake, don't do anything new. So it's okay though, if you have a willingness to be misunderstood for long periods of time, if you have a willingness to fail, then what you can do is you can ramp up your rate of experimentation. So successful invention is inventions that customers care about. It's actually relatively easy to invent new things that customers don't care about. But successful invention, if you want to do a lot of that, you basically have to increase your rate of experimentation. And that you can think of as a process. How do you go about organizing your systems, your people, all of your assets, your own daily life and how you spend time? How do you organize those things to increase your rate of experimentation? Because not all of your experiments are going to work. You don't choose your passions choose you. And all of us are gifted with certain passions, and the people who are lucky are the ones who get to follow those things. And I always advise our young employees, I meet with interns and so on, you can have, and my kids too, you can have a job, or you can have a career, or you can have a calling. And if you can somehow figure out how to have a calling, you have hit the jackpot, because that's the big deal. I think it's the very rare idea that can be done by a single individual. Almost everything that is going to change the world, solve a problem, improve something. These are usually big efforts, and they require, a team working together to really get something important done. And that has been the story of Amazon.com. At every step along the way, we've had a team here that is making this work. I mean, I don't know, even at the smallest scale, you have to figure out how to get help from your friends, from your family members, from people that you can hire in those early days. I think without that, it would never work. I spent an unusual amount of time with my grandparents, and especially with my grandfather on the ranch. So he had a ranch in South Texas, and I would spend my summers there from age 4 to 16. And when I was 4, they were taking me for the summer to kind of give my parents a break, sort of because they were so young. And it was useful. I was a handful, I'm sure. And anyway, he created the illusion for me when I was 4 years old that I was helping him on the ranch, which of course could not have been true, but I believed it. And then by the time I was 16, of course, I was actually helping on the ranch. I can fix prolapsed cattle. We did all of our own veterinary work. Some of the cattle even survived. And we fixed windmills and laid water pipelines and built fences and barns and fixed the bulldozer that you guys talked about. And so one of the things that's so interesting about that lifestyle and about my grandfather is he did everything himself. He didn't call a vet if one of the animals was sick. He figured out what to do himself. And
so what does it mean? No delegation?
Being resourceful, I think, is that you can't, if there's a problem, there's a solution. And of course, as you mature and get into the business world and anything you do on a team, you very quickly realize that it's not about just your own resourcefulness, it's about team resourcefulness and how does that work. The best defense to speech that you don't like about yourself as a public figure is to develop a thick skin. It's really the only effective defense because you can't stop it. You are going to be misunderstood. If you're doing anything interesting in the world, you're going to have critics. The only way, if you absolutely can't tolerate critics, then don't do anything new or interesting. And then you can insulate yourself. Then think how wonderful your life will be.
Is that the Bezos principle?
Yeah. Usually people, if you see something, I don't know, you're kind of a public figure, and things have probably been written about you that you didn't think were nice.
That's true.
And my advice, if you came to me and said, Jeff, somebody wrote this and it really hurt my feelings, what should I do? I would say, go stand on a street corner and watch in a crowded urban area and watch all the people walk by and think about what they're thinking about. I bet you none of those people are thinking about you. If you're standing on that street corner, and really in your mind you can do this thought experiment, like, okay, there's a woman who just walked by. What's she actually thinking about? Probably maybe what she's going to cook for dinner that night, or that the argument that she had with one of her employees, or whatever it is. Like, it's not about us. I have this great luxury. I love my job. I tap dance into work. I just got back from an amazing vacation in Norway. I got to go dog sledding and go to a wolf preserve and all this really cool stuff. But I couldn't wait to get back to work because it's so fun. And one of the reasons it's fun for me is I get to work in the future. So my job, I have very limited kind of day-to-day operational needs. I've constructed my job so that I don't have to be pulled into the present. I can stay 2 or 3 years in the future. My job, one of my jobs as the leader of Amazon, is to encourage people to be bold. And people love to focus on things that aren't yet working. And that's good, it's human nature. That kind of divine discontent can be very helpful. But it's incredibly hard to get people to take bold bets. And you need to encourage that. And if you're gonna take bold bets, they're gonna be experiments. And if they're experiments, you don't know ahead of time whether they're gonna work. Experiments are by their very nature prone to failure. But a few big successes compensate for dozens and dozens of things that didn't work. So, bold bets, AWS, Kindle, Amazon Prime, our third-party seller business, all of those things are examples of bold bets that did work, and they pay for a lot of experiments. I've made billions of dollars of failures at Amazon.com, literally billions of dollars of failures. And you might remember Pets.com or Cosmo, or give myself a root canal with no anesthesia very easily. None of those things are fun, but they don't matter. What really matters is companies that don't continue to experiment, companies that don't embrace failure, they eventually get in a desperate position where the only thing they can do is make a kind of Hail Mary bet at the very end of their corporate existence. Whereas companies that are, making bets all along, even, big bets, but not bet the company bets. I don't believe in bet the company bets. That's when you're desperate. That's the last thing you can do. I picked books because there were more items in the book category than any other category, and so you could build universal selection. There were 3 million in 1994 when I was pulling this idea together. The 3 million different books active and in print at any given time, and the largest physical bookstores only had about 150,000 different titles. And so I could see how you could make a bookstore online with universal selection. Every book ever printed, even the out-of-print ones, was the original vision for the company. And so that's why books.
And when did you know that Amazon is going to be something way bigger than just a bookstore?
Well, I knew that the books, strangely, because I was very prepared for this to take a really long time. I knew that the books business was going to be successful in the first 30 days. I was shocked at how many books we sold. We were ill prepared. We had only 10 people in the company at that time, and most of them were software engineers. And so everybody, including me and the software engineers, were all like packing boxes. We didn't even have packing tables. And we were on our hands and knees on a concrete floor packing the boxes. And at about 1 or 2 in the morning, I said to one of my software engineering colleagues, I said, Paul, this is killing my knees. We need to get knee pads. And Paul looked at me and he's like, Jeff, we need to get packing tables. and I was like, oh my God, that is such a good idea. The next day I bought packing tables, and it doubled our productivity and probably saved our backs and our knees too. I think this is a golden age of television. So when you look at, TV series today, the really good TV series are, in terms of quality, they're as good as the very best movies have ever been. And you're getting the best storytellers to come do television. You're getting the best actors to now come do television. One of the great storytellers is right here. Thank you for the help.
Thank you.
And this is a big deal when you can get the very best people, because this is one of those businesses where the viewer is always looking for something a little fresh. And so you can never find a formula, because as soon as you find a formula, it's not fresh anymore. They're always looking for something a little new. So it really takes human ingenuity. It takes people. The storytellers have to be in touch with the zeitgeist. And what I want Amazon Studios to be all over the world, I want us to be known as the most talent-friendly studio in the world. And the reason you need to do that, thank you, is because at the end of the day, it is the talent that makes those stories. Storytelling is the oldest thing that humans do. We've been doing it for thousands and thousands of years. Long before there was written language, before there was any medium to convey it, people sat around and they told each other stories. And it's how we teach each other things. And we learn from stories. We learn from fiction. We learn from fiction because we get to live an alternate life. In that moment, you watch this and you're learning it. So it can be fun, it can be action, it can be funny, it can be comedy, but the very best things take those elements and teach a little something. There's something in there that you walk away with and you're inspired by it. And it doesn't matter if it's drama, comedy, anything. you're going to walk away with something. And there needs to be lightness. You can't watch something that's just all heavy and you're like, oh my God, I want to kill myself now. There also has to be that gesture. There has to be somebody who brings you out and lets you breathe a little bit. So this is so hard to do. That's why there is so many bad movies and so many bad TV shows, because it is one of the hardest things that humans do, is tell riveting, engaging, inspiring stories. But when you get it right, it's a lever that can change the world. Customers are always dissatisfied. Even when they don't know it, even when they think they're happy, they actually do want a better way, and they just don't know yet what that should be. And that's why I always warn people, customer obsession is not just listening to customers. Customer obsession is also inventing on their behalf, because it's not their job to invent for themselves. And so you need to be an inventor and a pioneer. Everything I've ever done has started small. Amazon started with a couple of people, and Blue Origin started with 5 people, and the budget at Blue Origin was very, very small. Now the budget at Blue Origin approaches $1 billion a year. And next year it'll be more than $1 billion. In Amazon, it literally was 10 people. Today it's 500,000 people, but it's hard to remember for you guys, but for me it's like yesterday I was driving the packages to the post office myself, and hoping one day we could afford a forklift. And so for me, I've seen small things get big, and it's part of this day one mentality. I like treating things as if they're small. Amazon, even though it is a large company, I want it to have the heart and spirit of a small one. We all get gifts. We get certain things in our life that that we're very lucky about. And one of the most powerful one is who your early role models are. They could be your parents. It was your
grandfather.
It was, in a big sense. My mom and dad, but my grandfather too. And my mom had me when she was 17 years old, and she was still in high school in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And this is in 1964. I can assure you that being a pregnant teenager in high school was not cool in Albuquerque, New Mexico at that time. And so it was difficult for her. My grandfather went to bat for her when they tried to kick her out of school, and they're incredible. So the gift I had is I had this incredible family. I think probably our most important piece of intellectual property is our brand name. And I think people, and I think this is very important for anybody who's going to start a company or market an invention to understand, is that brands for companies are like reputations for people. And reputations are hard-earned and easily lost. So the most important intellectual property that a company can have is, for us, it's Amazon. It's that name, but what it stands for. And we've worked very hard to earn trust. You can't ask for trust. You just have to do it the hard way, one step at a time. You make a promise and then fulfill the promise. You say, we'll deliver this to you tomorrow, and then you actually deliver it tomorrow. And if you do that over and over again, then ultimately you can instill your company's name with a reputation. And that's, I think, sometimes people talk about brands in this very amorphous way, but for me, I like to think of it as a person, and what is the reputation that person has, and how have they earned that reputation? We try to create teams that are no larger than can be fed with 2 pizzas. We call that the 2 pizza team rule. No PowerPoints are used inside of Amazon. So every meeting, when we hire a new executive from the outside, this is the weirdest meeting culture you will ever encounter. And new executives have a little bit of, culture shock in their first Amazon meeting, because what we do is somebody for the meeting has prepared a 6-page memo, a narratively structured memo that is got, real sentences and topic sentences and verbs and nouns, not just bullet points. And it lays out and supposed to create the context for what will then be a good discussion. So, and then we read those memos silently in the meeting. So it's like a study hall. And we do that, everybody sits around the table, and we read silently for usually about half an hour, however long it takes us to read the document. And then we discuss it. And it's so much better than the typical PowerPoint presentation for so many reasons. I definitely recommend the memo over the PowerPoint. And the reason we read them in the room, by the way, is because just like, high school kids, executives will bluff their way through the meeting as if they've read the memo. Because we're busy, and so you got to actually carve out the time for the memo to get read, and that's what the first half hour of the meeting is for. And then everybody's actually read the memo. They're not just pretending to have read the memo. If you're giving great customer experience, the only way to do that is with happy people. You can't do it with a set of miserable people, watching the clock all day.
So does that include work-life balance and all those things?
Yes, but I teach 3 leadership classes a year at Amazon. I'm a part of it. They're bigger classes, but I come in and teach a session. And I always talk about work-life balance, except I like to use the phrase work-life harmony rather than balance, because to me, balance implies a strict trade, whereas I find that when I am happy at work, I come home more energized, I'm a better husband, a better dad, and when I'm happy at home, I come in and better boss and better colleague. And so it's not, you could be out of work and have terrible work-life balance. Even though you've got all the time in the world,
right.
You could just feel like, oh my God, I'm miserable, and you would be draining energy. And so you have to find that harmony. It's a much better word. And I think for most people, it's about meaning. People want to know that they're doing something interesting and useful. And for us, because of the challenges that we have chosen for ourselves, we get to work in the future, and it's super fun to work in the future.
Changing your mind a lot is so important. You should never let anybody trap you with anything you've said in the past, because that is life is complicated, the world is complicated, and sometimes you get new data, and when you get new data, you should change your mind. By the way, sometimes you don't get new data, and you just reanalyze the situation, and you realize it's more complicated than you initially thought it was, and you change your mind. This is something, it's frustrating to watch, and I will not get into politics here tonight, but it's frustrating to watch politicians because they're almost not allowed to change their mind. As soon as they change their mind, they get accused of being flip-floppers. When reality is anybody who doesn't change their mind a lot is dramatically underestimating the complexity of the world that we live in.
There are a lot of things that are a waste of time. When you think about your life, I often tell people that I work with, if you can get, because people have very high standards for how they want their work life to be, and I said, look, if you can get your work life to be where you enjoy half of it, that is amazing, because very few people ever achieve that. Because the truth is, everything comes with overhead. That's reality. Everything comes with pieces that you don't like. You could be a Supreme Court justice, and there's still going to be pieces of your job you don't like. You can be a university professor, and it's still going to be, you have to go to committee meetings, and you have to do things. Every job comes with pieces you don't like, and we need to say, that's part of it, and not resent those pieces, or try not to. But also try to minimize them. I tell senior executives, you should have the least stress. There's this weird, I think, false idea that CEOs, I'm a CEO, there's this false idea that CEOs are under the most stress. Well, I look at that, I'm like, why? You're in charge. Why don't you delegate the stress? It's your choice. And so you have to figure out how to set up your life in such a way that you can minimize the things. And I find people don't dislike hard work. What people dislike is being out of control. Like they can't control their life, they can't control their environment. This happens to me when I get overscheduled. I hate being overscheduled. I want some time to be able to think and free myself. We all have the same amount of time in the world. Nobody has more time than anybody else. And when you become a very successful person, one of the things, you start to get overscheduled. You have this event, you had to agree to do this, and maybe last night you were like, why did I agree to do this? I have to go on stage tomorrow. I wish I were really with my family. And, you know, or I hope maybe not this case. Let's say that you like this one. But in general, that kind of thing happens. And so you have to guard your time and try to stay a little bit flexible. So that's, for me, it's not a waste of time, but I like to have some freedom of movement rather than having every minute of every day scheduled. I believe in the power of wandering. All of my best decisions in business and in life have been made with heart, intuition, guts, not analysis. When you can make a decision with analysis, you should do so. But it turns out in life that your most important decisions are always made with instinct, intuition, taste, heart. We do so many different things. So this is a question I sometimes get. How can you do so many different things? Why don't you stick to the knitting? The kind of traditional advice would be to stay focused and keep the business simple. And the way I think about this is we actually do stick to one thing. It's just not described. It's not the business itself. We do web services, which is, big enterprises buying compute services from us, and we have our retail business, and we have Amazon Studios, which is making original content, Amazon Go, the things you listed. So, but the cultural thread that runs through all of these things is the same. We only have a few principles at Amazon, kind of core values that we go back to over and over again. And if you looked at each of the things that we do, you would see those run straight through everything. So the first one, and by far the most important one, is customer obsession. And we talk about it as customer obsession as opposed to competitor obsession. And I have seen over and over again companies talk about that they're customer focused, but really when I pay close attention to them, I believe they are competitor focused. And that's just a completely different mentality. By the way, competitor focus can work, but I don't think it works in the long run as well as customer focused. For one thing, once you're the leader, if your whole culture is competitor obsessed, it's kind of hard to stay energized and motivated if you're out in front. Whereas customers are always unsatisfied, they're always discontent, they always want more. And so no matter how far you get out there in front of your competitors, you're still behind your customers. So they're always pulling you along. So customer obsession is a deep principle that underlies everything we do. Another one is eagerness to invent. So we love to pioneer. And when we have done, by the way, whenever we have tried to do something in a kind of Me Too fashion, we have failed at it. We need to have something that is differentiated, unique, something that customers are going to like, that we're kind of leading with. So that's another element that works for us. And then another one is long-term thinking. We are willing to take some time and be patient with our business initiatives, and that runs through everything. So a lot of our competitors might have 2 to 3 year kind of time frames, and we might have more of a 5 to 7 year sort of time frame. And then the last one, operational excellence. So literally, how do you have high standards around, identifying defects, fixing defects at the root, all of those kinds of things that lead to what I think also can be in a simpler way just stated as professionalism, that you want to do things right just for the sake of doing them right. One of the reasons we have been able to extend into new business areas and first new product categories, going way back, we just sold books and then we started selling music and DVDs and electronics and toys and so on. And then we've extended into electronic reading with Kindle. The reason customers have been receptive in large part to our new initiatives is because we have worked hard to earn trust with them. Earning trust with customers is a valuable business asset. And if you mistreat their data, they will know. They will figure it out. Customers are very smart. You should never underestimate customers.
It's easy to have ideas. It's very hard to turn an idea into a successful product. There are a lot of steps in between, and it takes persistence, relentlessness. So I always tell people who are, who think they want to be entrepreneurs, you need a combination of stubborn relentlessness and flexibility. And you have to know when to be which. And basically you need to be stubborn on your vision, because otherwise it'll be too easy to give up. But you need to be very flexible on the details, because as you go along pursuing your vision, you'll find that some of your preconceptions were wrong. And you're going to need to be able to change those things. So I think taking an idea successfully all the way to the market and turning it into a real product that people care about and that really improves people's lives is a lot of hard work.
I was living and working in New York City in 1994, and I came across the fact that the World Wide Web was growing very quickly. It was tiny, but it was growing very fast. Most people had not heard of it. And I came up with this idea. The idea initially was very simple. It was to sell books online. And I went to my boss, who I liked a lot. His name was David. And I said, I have this idea to start this company to sell books on the internet. And he took me on a long walk in Central Park in New York and listened to this idea in great detail. And he said, it actually sounds like a really good idea to me, but I think it would be a better idea for somebody who didn't already have a good job. And I thought about that. That made a certain amount of sense to me. And he said, why don't you think about it for 2 days before you make a final decision? And so I went away and I thought about this. And I was trying to figure out how to make this decision, because in the moment, personal life decisions, those choices can be very challenging. And I finally figured out for me the right way to think about it, which was, I wanted not to have regrets. I pictured myself, 80 years old, and thinking back on my life in a quiet moment of reflection. Would I regret leaving this company in the middle of the year and walking away from my annual bonus and all of those things that in the moment could be very confusing? And I thought, when I'm 80, I'm not going to think about that. I'm not even going to remember it. But what I will do, I know for a fact, I have this idea, and if I don't try, I'm going to regret having never tried. And I know also, if I try and fail, I'll never regret having tried and failed. And as soon as I thought about it that way, I knew I had to give it a try.
Now that you have about 600,000 employees, I calculated you're adding about 250 people a day. You've mentioned that you're trying to fend off day 2.
Yeah.
And you've said that day 2 is stasis, followed by irrelevance, followed by excruciatingly painful decline, followed by death. That is why it is always day 1.
Yeah.
How's that work?
Well, so day 1, this is a phrase that we use at Amazon all the time. I've been using it in my first annual shareholder letter from 20 years ago. And we say it's always day 1. And it needs to be day 1 for the reason that you just mentioned. And so the real question for me is, how do you go about maintaining a day 1 culture? It's great to have the scale of Amazon. We have financial resources. We have lots of brilliant people. We can accomplish great things. We have global scope. We have operations all over the world. But the downside of that is that you can lose your nimbleness. You can lose your entrepreneurial spirit. You can lose that kind of heart that small companies often have. And so if you could have the best of both worlds, if you can have that entrepreneurial spirit and heart, while at the same time having all the advantages that come with scale and scope. Think of the things that you could do. And so the question is, how do you achieve that? The scale is good because it makes you robust. You know, a big boxer can take a punch to the head. The question is, you also want to dodge those punches. So you'd like to be nimble. You want to be big and nimble. And I find that there are a lot of things that are protective of the day one mentality. I already spent some time on one of them, which is customer obsession. I think that's the most important thing. If you can, and it gets harder as you get bigger. When you're a little tiny company, say you're a 10-person startup company, every single person in the company is focused on the customer. When you get to be a bigger company, you've got middle managers and you've got all these layers, and those people aren't on the front lines. They're not interacting with customers every day. They're insulated from customers. And they start to manage not the customer happiness directly, but they start to manage through proxies like metrics and processes, and some of those things can become bureaucratic. So it's very challenging. But one of the things that happens is the decision-making velocity slows down. And I think one of the reasons that happens is that people, say junior executives inside the big company, start to model all decisions as if they are heavyweight, irreversible, highly consequential decisions. And so even two-way doors, you make a decision, it's the wrong decision, you can just back through the door and try again. Even those reversible decisions start to be made with heavyweight processes. And so you can teach people that these pitfalls and traps, and then teach them to avoid those traps. And that's what we're trying to do at Amazon, so that we can maintain our inventiveness and our heart and our kind of small company spirit, even as we have the scale and scope of a larger company. My greatest, I would have such a good feeling if I could be an 80-year-old guy and laying there thinking about my life, if I could say, look, there is now a bunch of entrepreneurs in space because I took my Amazon lottery winnings and built the heavy lifting infrastructure that does take billions of dollars in CapEx to lower the cost of access to space. That's how you get millions of people living and working. And by the way, we need that. For those of you who like to think about the future at all, you can do a simple calculation. You know, we can argue about, you know, what limited resources on Earth and so on and so on. But here's a calculation that you cannot argue with, which is you take current baseline energy usage on Earth, compound it at just a few % a year for just a few hundred years, and you have to cover the entire surface of the Earth in solar cells. So we're going to have to decide, do we want a society of pioneering, invention, expansion, growth, or do we want a society of stasis? And personally, I believe, because the Earth is finite, and if you want a society of stasis, I think it's going to, first of all, I don't personally believe that stasis is even compatible with freedom, so I think for me that's a big problem. Second of all, it's going to be dull. Stasis is going to be very dull. You don't want to live in the stasis world. And so, of course, we're going to continue to get more efficient too. We have been. For hundreds of years, we've been getting more productive, more efficient. That trend is going to continue. But even so, we're going to want to use more energy per capita. And also, I don't want a stabilized population. I would love for there to be 1 trillion humans in the solar system. With 1 trillion humans, we would have 1,000 Einsteins and 1,000 Mozarts. It'd be an incredible civilization. Don't you want that dynamism? It'd be so much more interesting. This is for your great-great-great-grandchildren, but what kind of world do you want them to live in? I want them to live in that expansive world that is, you know, learning more about the universe and moving out throughout the solar system. By the way, getting it wrong isn't that bad. That's the other thing. When we make mistakes, and we've made doozies like the Fire Phone and many other things that just didn't work out, we don't have enough time for me to list all of our failed experiments, but the big winners pay for thousands of failed experiments. So you try something like Prime, and it was very expensive at the beginning. It cost us a lot of money, because what happens when you offer a free all-you-can-eat buffet? Who shows up to the buffet first? The heavy eaters. It's scary. It's like, oh my God, did I really say as many prawns as you can eat? And so that is what happened. But surely we could see the trend lines. We could see that, all kinds of customers were coming and they appreciated that service.
Amazon has 14 leadership principles, and this is the one that often catches people a little by surprise, because one of our leadership principles is that good leaders are right a lot. And it sounds kind of like, well, great, but is there some way that I can practice being right a lot? And you're not going to be right all the time, but I do think with practice, you can be right more often. And I've observed people who are right a lot, and I notice a few things about them. The first is that people who are right a lot, they listen a lot. And people who are right a lot change their mind a lot. And people who are right a lot, they seek to disconfirm their most profoundly held convictions, which is very unnatural for humans. So humans mostly, as we go about life, we're very selective in the evidence that we let seep into us. And we like to observe the evidence that confirms our pre-existing beliefs. And people who are right a lot work very hard to do that unnatural thing of trying to disconfirm their beliefs.
The great thing about humans in general is we're always improving things. And so entrepreneurs and inventors, if they follow their curiosity and they follow their passions and they figure something out and then they figure out how to make it better and they're never satisfied. And you need to harness that. In my view, you need to harness that energy primarily on your customers instead of on your competitors. And so I sometimes see companies and even young, small startup companies, entrepreneurs go awry is they start to pay more attention to their competition than they do to their customers. And I think that in big mature industries, that might be a winning approach in some cases, kind of close following. Let other people be the pioneers and go down the blind alleys. There's many things that a new inventive company tries won't work. And so those mistakes and errors and failures do cost real money. And so maybe in a mature industry where growth rates are slow and change is very slow. But as you see in the world more and more, there aren't very many mature industries. Change is happening everywhere. We see it in the automobile industry with self-driving cars, but you could go right down the line of every industry and you would see it.
Was there a moment you thought, I might not make it?
The riskiest moment for Amazon, Charlie, was at the very, very beginning. I needed to raise $1 million at a certain point. And I ended up giving away 20% of the company for $1 million.
A hell of a deal for somebody.
A lot of people did very well on that deal. But they also took a risk, so they deserved to do very well on that deal. But I had to take 60 meetings to raise $1 million, and I raised it from 22 people at approximately $50,000 a person. And it was nip and tuck whether I was going to be able to raise that money. So the whole thing could have ended before it even started. That was 1995, and the first question every investor asked me was, what's the internet? I'm actually a big fan of anecdotes in business, not building a narrative structure around them necessarily, but I still have an email address that customers can write to. I see most of those emails, and I don't answer very many of them anymore, but I see them, and I forward them, some of them, the ones that catch my curiosity, I forward them to the executives in charge of that area with a question mark. And that question mark is just a shorthand for, can you look into this? Why is this happening? What's going on? And what I find is very interesting, because we have tons of metrics. We have, weekly business reviews with these metric decks, and we know so many things about customers and their whether we're delivering on time, whether the packages have too much air in them and, wasteful of packaging and so on. We have so many metrics that we monitor. And the thing I have noticed is that when the anecdotes and the data disagree, the anecdotes are usually right. There's something wrong with the way you're measuring it. And that's why it's so important to to keep you need to run something where you're doing, shipping billions of packages a year. For sure, you need good data and metrics. Are you delivering on time? Are you delivering on time in every city? Are you delivering on time to apartment complexes? Are you delivering on time in certain countries? You do need the data, but then you need to check that data with your intuition and your instincts, and you need to teach that to all the senior executives and junior executives too.
Take pride in your choices, not your gifts. This is something that I think is super important for young people to understand, and for parents to preach to young people. It's really easy for a talented young person to take pride in their gifts. They can say, I'm really athletic, or I'm really smart, or I'm really good at math. And that's fine. You should celebrate your gifts. You should be happy, but you can't be proud of them because they're gifts after all. They were given to you. What you can be proud of is your choices. How did you decide to use your gifts? Did you study hard? Did you work hard? Did you practice? The people who really excel combine gifts and hard work. And the hard work part is a choice. You get to decide that. And that is something, when you're looking back on your life, you'll be very proud of.
When I started Amazon, it was 25 years ago. I started Amazon in 1994. When I went to seek investors, the first question I had to answer is, what is the internet? None of my investors had ever heard of the internet. And the idea that I had in mind was to build a bookstore. I realized that we could build a store which would have every book ever printed in any language, in print or out of print. And we could do that online. It would be impossible in a physical store. And that was the founding idea of Amazon. But did I expect what would happen today? No. We started, I've been at Amazon when it was one person, me, when it was 10 people, when it was 100 people, when it was 1,000 people. And today, when it's more than 700,000 people and approaching 70,000 people just here in India. So, no, I did not predict that. And actually, I think if anybody had predicted that, they would have needed to be immediately institutionalized in a mental facility because it's not a normal thing to have happen. My dream when I started Amazon was that one day we might be able to afford a forklift. So it's been a very fun journey for me. And by the way, I still tap dance into work. I'm having so much fun.
Your stock at one point, I think, went to $100, but then it went down to $6 or something like that.
At the peak of the internet bubble, our stock peaked somewhere around $113. Okay. And then after the internet bubble, busted open, our stock went down to $6. It went from 113 to 6 in less than a year. So my annual shareholder that year starts with a one-word sentence, and that one-word sentence is the word ouch.
So most of those internet companies of the dot-com era are out of business.
Yeah.
You survived. What was it that made you to survive, and virtually the rest of them are gone?
That whole period is very interesting because the stock is not the company, and the company is not the stock. And so as I watched the stock fall from 113 to 6, I was also watching all of our internal business metrics, number of customers, profit per unit, everything you can imagine, defects, etc. Every single thing about the business was getting better and fast. And so as the stock price was going the wrong way, everything inside the company was going the right way. And we didn't need to go back to the capital markets. We didn't need more money. The only reason, a financial bust like the internet bubble bursting is, makes it really hard to raise money. But, we already had the money we needed. So we just needed to continue to progress. At Amazon, one of the things we try to do is have multiple paths to yes. And so here's a little thought experiment for you. If you are a junior executive at Amazon, and if Amazon did this in the typical kind of corporate hierarchy way, you had an idea. You need to get your boss to greenlight that idea, and then your boss's boss needs to greenlight that idea, and then your boss's boss's boss needs to greenlight that idea. There are probably 5 levels or more before that idea gets the go-ahead. Assume instead that you're an entrepreneur with a startup company idea and you need venture capital. You go to Sand Hill Road and you go to the first venture capitalist and they tell you no. And you go to the second one and they tell you no. Maybe your 20th one tells you yes. You got 19 no's and 1 yes, and you're still good to go. So that venture capital model there's multiple paths to yes. There were 20 people who could give you a yes, and it didn't matter how many gave you a no. So if you want innovative thinking, you have to think about how can we you want a large number of high judgment people empowered to greenlight things. You want multiple paths to yes. And you want a system where, as a junior Air Force officer with a good idea, the first 5 people tell me no, and somehow I can still go pursue that idea. So you got to figure out, that's an organizational challenge that big organizations have to figure out a way to do. And by the way, I get, this happens all the time. I'll say, I don't think that's a good idea, but somebody else will greenlight it. And I'm fine with that, because usually the cost of the experiments is pretty small. Things only get expensive when they work, right? Once something works, you're like, whoa, we need to double down on that. And then the spending can get heavy, and then those become big consequential decisions, and that's where the hierarchy and using the judgment of the most senior people to me, this really helps.
If you want 10 more amazing Jeff Bezos rules, check out the video right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
We make money when people use the device, not when they buy the device. And that is very aligning with customers. If I buy a device and I